Okay, now we've covered enough that we're ready to start creating some actual page layouts. We're going to begin with creating something extremely simple, but this is just to solidify some of the topics that we've covered thus far. With CSS controls, using positioning of elements, you can go ahead and simply reproduce layouts that are going to illustrate some of the basic things that we've covered, but they'll also start to segue into some more advanced layouts. They're going to demonstrate how we can create clean and attractive layouts without, lots of extra code and lots of extra little boxes everywhere. It's really easy to forget the purpose of a web page, and that basically is to connect the user with content. A lot of this gets diluted with just all the extra bells and whistles that you can throw on a web page. So try to always ensure that anything that you're going to add to a page has a reason for being there. It is either going to help the user access the content or understand the relationship between the various types of content. Design, of course, can certainly aid in that factor, but you want it to be seamless. You don't want it to be too overpowering. Simple designs not only render consistently across a wide variety of user agents, but they also make it easier for the viewer to interact with the content. And ultimately that is your goal. So keep that in mind as you start to design and lay out a page. You don't want someone to wonder where to go or what to click on next because of poor organization or excessive screen, just junk basically. When the interface becomes more of the focus and not the content, then basically your job as a designer or a web developer is basically failing. You want the designed interface to basically be almost invisible to the user, in that they're not going to really notice it's there, but obviously it's going to accentuate and help with the process of them getting the information they need from a web page. Anyways, enough of that. Let's go into creating a simple two-column layout. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to be using a really simple page. This is what the page looks like right now without any CSS. And if we look here, you can basically see that here is my web page. It's waiting for me to put in some content. I haven't inserted any divs, so we'll go ahead and we'll be creating the divs to use on this web page as well, so that we can control where the information is going to be linked. I have an unordered list, which I'm calling navigation, even though none of these are links, and I just didn't make them links, so we didn't have to worry about styling that right now. But you certainly could make them links, and you already know how to style links to some extent, so you can definitely do that. In this particular example, the navigation column is going to be a fixed width, but the content area is going to be fluid, so that means that it's going to change width depending on the width of the browser window. So that's what we'll be focusing on here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a couple divs to my body section so that I can basically control this with CSS. I'm going to begin by making a div, and I'm going to assign ID to this div. This one is going to be called nav. And then we'll go ahead and close the div after the UL tag. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, after I've done this correctly, let's put a return right there. Let's go ahead and create another div. And this one is going to have an ID assigned to it as well. And we'll just call this one content. And I'm going to close this div at the very bottom of my page right before my body tag is going to close. Alright, so if we save the page, obviously nothing is going to happen because the divs don't do anything to the page until we start to assign styles to them. So let's go about that next. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of use our universal CSS style to remove all padding and margin to everything on the page. So I'll go ahead and use my my asterisk selector. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set all of the margins to 0 and all of the padding to 0. And let's go ahead and let's set a style to the body tag. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to specify my font family, and for this example we'll just use Arial and then request a sans serif if that is not available. And let's go ahead and let's just change the color of the text to be a little bit of a lighter, like we'll just use a 333, which is a really dark gray really, but it'll be a little lighter than the black that's there by default. So if I save and I refresh my page, this is basically what we've done. Everything gets slammed into the upper and left sides of the page. You can see that none of my paragraphs have any sort of spacing in between them. My H2 tag doesn't have any spacing, neither do my lists. So now we can go about our business of actually styling the page. Let's go ahead and let's add some of the spacing back into some of these elements. So I'll make a style for my H2 tag, and I'm going to go ahead and just set the margin bottom. And we'll go ahead and we'll set this to 1em. And then let's go ahead and create a paragraph style. And on our paragraph tag, we'll go ahead and we'll specify font size. And let's make this 0.75 ems. And we'll also go ahead and set the margin bottom for our paragraph. And I'm going to go ahead and use a value of 1em for that as well. So if I go ahead and save and we refresh the page, now you can see that I start to get some spacing between the various elements that are on my page. Alrighty. The next thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and let's start to create some styles for the divs that we created. So we'll start by styling our nav div, and I'm going to go ahead and create my 2-column layout. In this particular example, I'm going to go ahead and create a 2-column layout by using the position attribute. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the position of this particular div to be set to absolute. I basically want to break the navigation out of the flow of the document by positioning it absolutely. So I'll go ahead and do that first, and let's in addition set a width value. So let's try 150 pixels. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and turn on my border. Let's just turn on a border right so that we can see where the edge of the div is. So I'll go ahead and I'll put a border, let's just put a border right on there. And I'm going to go ahead and set the border right to be 1 pixel, and I'll have it be solid, and we'll have it be a color of 069, which is kind of a blue color. Alright, let's save our page and let's refresh to see what we have. You can basically see that now, since I absolutely positioned the navigation div, it basically is going to break that out of the flow of the document, and we know that by absolutely positioning an element, that's basically what we're going to do. You can see where my 150 width div ends because of the blue line that I put in there. We're just going to keep that in temporarily. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to create some additional styles that are going to allow us to have some margin and padding on this so that it's not going to be all slammed into the left. But before we do that, why don't we straighten out what's going on with the content area right here. Let's push the content away. We want the content area to now not underlay underneath the navigation div, but we want to basically move that so that it is to the right of that. So we're going to go ahead and do that with a value of margin. So I'll come down here and I will make a style for content, and on our content div I'm just going to go ahead and set my margin settings to start off with. So I'll go ahead and set margin, and I'm going to use shorthand right now. We're going to use 20 pixels for the top. We're going to use 0 and 0 for both the right and the bottom, And then on the left-hand edge, I'm going to go ahead and for now we'll just push this away 150 pixels so that we can actually not have this text overlapping. So let's just save and let's refresh. And now you can see that I have a very, very simple 2-column layout. We're going to go ahead and modify this a little bit more, but the thing that I want to point out is that the navigation portion is basically fixed. It doesn't change based on the width of my browser window, but the content area is not fixed. It basically flexes and flows to accommodate however much space is available, and that was basically our goal in creating this simple 2-column layout. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a few more styles just to refine this slightly. As I said before, we're keeping this very simple, so we're not going to go overboard at all, but we do want to do a couple more things. So the next thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and let's add a little bit of style to the navigation. We don't want this to be all slammed up in the left-hand corner, so let's move that over. I'm going to go ahead and do that by setting some margin and padding settings to my nav div. We'll go ahead and we'll set the margin first. So let's get my M in there so it actually functions the way I want. We're going to go ahead and set margin, and again I'm using shorthand values here, so I'm just going to write it all in one declaration. 55 pixels for the top, 0 for the right, 0 for the bottom, and for the left let's just use 15 pixels. Now because I'm going ahead and I'm adding 15 pixels on the right hand side, that's adding it to the width. So my width value now is going to change to 165. If I save this now and refresh, you can see how this div is overlaying, and I need to adjust that by pushing my second column away now. Instead of 150 pixels, which was what we used before, I need to actually push it away 165 pixels. So let's change this number here to 165. And now when I save the page and refresh the page, you can see that now this starts right at the right-hand border that I just temporarily put on there so we could actually see where this div was kind of residing. So definitely keep that in mind, and we've discussed that before. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead, now that I have my margin setting on there, let's add a little bit of padding. So I'll go ahead and set the padding. And again, using the shorthand method of entering, we're going to use a padding of 5 ems for the top, and then I'm going to set everything else to 0. So I'll just go ahead and specify 0 for everything else. So if I save and refresh, you can see that it just pushes this down a tiny little bit, which is just what I wanted. I basically want this to kind of line up with my paragraph right there. All right, let's go ahead and let's style the list a little bit. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a new style that is going to allow us to control the list. I'm going to go ahead and target nav UL because I only want to affect unordered lists that are within the navigation div in case I'm going to use unordered lists somewhere else on my page. Now that's not going to be the case for me here, but it's always a good idea to think about this because obviously lists are areas where you're probably going to be using them frequently. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify the margin top for my list be set to 0 pixels just to zero this out, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the margin bottom for my list to, and let's try a value of maybe 0.8 ems. We'll save and let's refresh, and basically you can see it just extends my blue line slightly right there. My blue line now starts flush with my text, so I can ensure that this is going to be lined up correctly. We'll go ahead and we'll style the list items now. So I'm going to make another style for nav space li. So this is any list item that is located within my nav div. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to tighten up the font size. So we'll set the font size to be 0.75 ems. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set the font weight for these. And we'll go ahead and make them bold. Since we're assuming this would be our navigation, I'll do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the margin bottom for my list items to spread them out a little bit, so let's make that 0.5 ems. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of those list style, the bullets, the list style type, and I'm going to set that to none to eliminate those so they no longer look like they're part of a list. Let's save and refresh, and now you can see what I get right here. So that's exactly what I want. That's looking much better in our 2-column layout, and again, my content area is flexible where my navigation stays fixed. A couple more things that we're going to do in here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to change I'm going to get rid of the border right. So let's just go ahead and we'll add a border top in there. I'm going to keep the same values for the border top. And let's also add a border bottom just to kind of highlight that area of my page. I'm going to go ahead and save and refresh, and you can see how these lines have changed. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to move the content away from the edge of these lines slightly. So we'll go into our content div and make adjustments there. We set some margin settings before. Now I'm going to use padding to push the content away. So I'll just go ahead and use padding, and we'll set the padding to go ahead and be top is going to be 0. I'm going to use 1.5 ems on the right, so I want to push it away from the edge of the browser a little bit. 0 for the bottom, and for the left we'll use 1 ems. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. I'm going to save and refresh, and now I have some additional spacing, probably a little more spacing on the left. Let's try 1.5 ems for that as well. And there we go. So this is just an example of a really simple 2-column layout that we use some really basic positioning. The only element that I basically positioned was my nav div, and then I accomplished the 2-column layout by just pushing my content div away from that left edge to make room. So this is a really great, easy way that you can start off doing, simple multi-column layouts.